All right, so today we're going to look at using templates and vApps. Okay, another short session. So last week we talked about virtual machines, and we all know how to create a virtual machine in VMware. Okay, it's basically the same process. It's nothing too dramatic from VMware Workstation to VMware vSphere. But obviously, we want to create virtual machines sometimes quite often. Okay. For example, another virtualization functionality is what's called desktop virtualization. Okay, have you heard of that term before? Maybe? No? Desktop virtualization? Yeah, have you heard of the term DAS? Let's look at, let's do a bit of a search and show you what I mean. Desktop virtualization. All right. Okay, so here, let's look at this one. Here's, for example, VMware. What is desktop virtualization? Desktop virtualization is a method of simulating a user workstation so that it can be accessed from a remotely connected device. So what does that mean? What it means is that on these, let's say we're average call center type place, nothing too process intensive, it's just office work, browsing internet, email, that kind of stuff, okay? So if we actually, instead of having full computers, sorry, not fitting. Instead of having full computers such as what you've got in front of you, maybe we can just deploy something like this, a thin client. Just a little box, really not much anything in there, no CPU as the way you see CPU, no RAM as the way you see RAM. It's just a way of connecting your monitor, your keyboard, your network Ethernet. But you can still use the full functionality of a Windows 10 or Windows 11. Okay, so if you think about it, let's say this is not TFS saying you don't have to do virtualization on these computers. Let's say that all of you guys are students in the office administration. You're doing Office, Word, Excel, PowerPoint. You're doing your email. You're going to do your internet browsing. That's all you do. Okay. I'm sure you can think of situations where that's all they do. None of this virtualization, none of this using specialized apps, but just using browser to interface with anything like that. Okay. So really, your desktop doesn't have to be very powerful, does it? Okay, I wouldn't think so. You can probably do most of those things from your phone. All right. But let's say that all of you guys are working for me and you guys are in this call center. And I don't need to give you a full desktop. I'll just give you one of these, but you still have your two monitors, you still have your keyboard, you still have your mouse, and you still have your interface. But where is the operating system installed? It's not installed on this little box, that's for sure. It's actually going to be running. Let's see if we can go back a little bit and see a picture. Let's look for images. So maybe a diagram will help us show us. So instead of actually, let's look for a good image that shows this a little bit better. All right. Okay, so let's go with this one. So basically, instead of having your operating system installed on your device that's in front of you, it's actually running somewhere in the cloud. Okay, the cloud can be the public cloud or it can be a private cloud. So let's look at VMware Horizons, the specific example. So basically, a VMware Horizons is obviously additional to VMware vSphere. It builds on top of it. But let's look at the picture. So VMware Horizons basically allows us to virtualize these virtual machines, but they're desktop virtual machines. on our infrastructure. And then you can have thin clients or even Android tablets, iOS, zero clients, which is basically the fit, or zero clients is thin clients, Windows clients, or Mac or Linux, doesn't matter. But from all of those, you can actually open up a virtual machine and use it as if that's the operating system in front of you. Get me, guys? Do you understand that? So basically, instead of me as a network administrator deploying operating system on each one of these computers, installing the software on each one of these, and obviously we talk about network deployment and all that kind of stuff, that yes, that can be much simpler. But what will be even more simpler is if I could just take a template, a virtual machine template, and just deploy a new virtual machine from it, wouldn't it? Just like you guys know of cloning. So going back to our PowerPoint, so the idea of the templates is that we can actually create something we are happy with, and then we can deploy many virtual machines from it. The idea we used in Cert 4 was the Golden Master, wasn't it? Same idea, Golden Master. What's the Golden Master? Golden Master is a template that we use to deploy all these other servers. So we can use templates in two ways. One way is that virtual desktop. That's probably the most popular way because that's get the most benefit because you got large numbers of clients you can deploy like that. But you can also use templates for every other purpose. You need a new Windows virtual machine, you use your Golden Master for Windows. You need a new Linux virtual machine, use a Linux template. You need whatever version, whatever configuration, you can have that as a template. So the benefit of a template is that you do a lot of things in the VM of the template or in the template that you don't have to do later. So if you want all your template to have Windows Server 2022 as operating system, VMware tools, and let's say that you want some other programs installed, like some tracking apps or specialized antivirus or anything, you can just add it on. You put it all onto the template, you get it exactly how you want it, and then you turn it into a template. Then you need a new server for Windows Server 2022. You get that template, you deploy. So if you remember, when we deploy a new virtual machine, you create the virtual machine with the virtual hardware, then you install the operating system, you configure the apps, and then you install VMware tools and all that kind of stuff. All that effort is just done, isn't it? So let's get into it. So today we're going to clone a VM. We're going to create a VM template. We're going to deploy a new VM from a template, and we're going to deploy a VM from an open. We're going to talk about deploying. We've already done this actually, to be honest, with our vCenter virtual app application. We're going to talk about the open virtualization format template, and we can export a virtual machine as an open virtualization format or OVF template, and then we'll talk about virtual apps. So cloning VMs is pretty same as what we know from VMware Workstation. Clone is just a copy. We can go through the official, the proper way of actually getting a VM, making a clone. Or we can just simply take the virtual machine files, make a copy. It's the same thing. The key difference between the two is that, remember when you clone a virtual machine, it knows it's a clone. And so the MAC address, remember the MAC address on the virtual network adapters is automatically given a new MAC address. Whereas if you make a copy, it doesn't know it's been copied. But that's why it always prompts you, did you copy or did you move it? Because if it detects it's in a different area of the file system, but if you choose I copied it, it would generate a new MAC address. But if you choose I moved it, it will keep the same MAC address. So if you have a virtual machine, you make a copy of it and you choose I moved it, you'll have two virtual machines with the same MAC address. Is that a problem? Big problem. Huge problem. Only one of those virtual machines will be able to work on your network. Okay? Because the switches will only recognize one of the MAC addresses as being a port. The other one is a duplicate MAC address and it will ignore it. It's the first one. Which one's first? I don't know. It's a lottery. It's whichever one communicates with the switch first. Okay. So you can make a copy of a virtual machine, including the virtual machine's virtual hard disk, how does this help you provision virtual machine faster? Well, you know what a clone is. You don't have to do all the things you just did on the previous machine. It's just an exact copy, right? So it's a lot faster. By cloning VMs, you eliminate the need to perform the guest OS installation into every new virtual machine. The potential problem, obviously, when we make a clone, it's not perfect. When we make a clone, we have duplicate MAC address, duplicate computer name, and if it's a static IP address, it'll be duplicate IP address, wouldn't it? Because it's exactly the same. What else is missing? What do we talk about in Cert 4 that is a big problem for Microsoft operating systems? If we make a copy. Remember Cert 4?
Special ID.
Yeah, special ID. What's that called? SID, the security identifier. All right, every Windows Microsoft object, like a computer, like a user account, has a SID in Active Directory. Okay, the SID is not a big deal if it's no Active Directory. Okay, if you want it to be part of an Active Directory trust security, then that security identifier is very important, because that it doesn't matter what you name it, doesn't matter what your user account is called, it doesn't matter what your computer account is called, it's the SID that it goes by. If you, the way I describe it is like, you guys are all students, right? We can have a student with the same first name, same last name. That's not a big deal. That happens quite often, actually, especially if you got some common names. But can you have two students with the same student ID? Definitely not. Okay, that is the uniqueness of your student account in our database. Have you heard of the term database and primary key? You guys know much about databases? Maybe? But every database has to have a primary key, which means that record is unique from every other record. Okay, the primary key is usually some sort of individualized ID. Okay, so the SID is what we use in the Active Directory database as the uniqueness. So how do we change the SID? Sysprep. Okay, so we use a system preparation tool, which is part of Microsoft, and we use it to actually regenerate the SID. We go to an out-of-the-box experience, and we basically recreate the SID. Okay, when we do it. So let's talk about it. So the potential problem is the IP address. Obviously, if it's a static IP address, then it can be duplicated. But obviously, we could just change it to automatically obtain IP address quite easily, couldn't I? Computer name, we can change that quite easily. MAC address, we can even change that. We can just go to the virtual machine, network adapter, tell it to generate a new one. VMware has the ability to customize the guest OS in the clone VM. So remember how in Cert 4, what did we do? We manually did sysprep on the Golden Master before we took a snapshot, right? So that's that. The reason for that is that when we did the sysprep, we went through halfway through the sysprep, we took a snapshot, and then from that snapshot, we cloned a new virtual machine and new virtual machine all the time, right? And when we cloned the new virtual machine completed the sysprep process, which then gave it a unique SID. Okay, that's what we did. We manually did that. We started the sysprep process on the Golden Master, and we took a snapshot at that point in time. But what this is saying is VMware, vSphere, has the ability to customize the guest operating system in the clone VM to create a new identity. Okay, for Linux-based guest OSs, VMware uses the open source format tools to customize the installation. For Windows-based guest OSs, vCenter will use the Microsoft sysprep tool. Okay, but you must have a first install sysprep onto the vCenter server if it's a Windows-based one. But for us, we're going to use it we don't have a Windows-based one, so we're going to be using it in our tool anyway. So to customize a Windows-based guest OS installation, vCenter server uses the Microsoft sysprep tool. The sysprep, like we know, is a system preparation tool. It basically is designed to prepare the system for cloning or for imaging for mass deployment. Okay, sysprep was never installed for cloning virtual machines. It was in the old days. We can create images of a computer. So we install it on a piece of hardware, We take the image, we store the image, and then we send the image to all of these computers in one go. So that's one way of mass deploying all these workstation computers, for example. Here's an older picture, but it's the same methodology. We can create what's called a customization. Okay, we select a customized option for the guest operating system. We create a customization specification, and we use it wherever we need to. The vCenter server customization specification works hand in hand with the tools for cloning VMs. The administrator has to provide the vCenter with the information necessary to give the clone VMs its own identity. So with this customization specification, we can tell it to go into the virtual machine of the clone and change the IP address to this one or to automatic. Set the password, set the computer name, set the licensing information, wherever that might be. A customization specification allows the administrator to provide all the information only once and then apply it when it needs to when it clones the machine. So basically, this customization specification, I just create once, and every time I need to use it, I use it again. It's all modular, okay? The modular thing is that you can reuse it again and again and again. You don't have to create it every time. You can create a customization specification in the following two ways. During the process of cloning, you can create one at that point in time if you want to, or you can create it first and then just use it in the cloning process. So again, older image, but same sort of idea. We can just go to the customization specification manager, click on this, and then create the customization specification. Is it possible to clone even a powered on VM? It's possible, yeah, it's possible to clone a powered on VM. Yeah, we know that. We've done that plenty of times, haven't we? So that's nothing new. The context, so what we can do is we can just right click on the virtual machine and this allows us to clone options. Okay, so that's nothing new for us. To clone a new virtual machine option from the command list, a VM summary page accomplishes the same task. So basically this is saying is you can do it this way, you can do it that way. Do you understand what this context menu means? Have you heard of that term before? It's when you right click on something. See, when I right click on this slideshow, it gives me options for this slideshow, right? So that means it's these options are relative to what I clicked on. When we say context, means context it's relative to what we're looking at. So when we talk about context menu, it's wherever we're looking at, we right click, and then that gives us options. These commands are available for VMs that are powered off as well as the VMs that are powered on. Keep in mind that unless you customize the guest operating system, an exact copy of the original will be made. So if you don't use the customization, you just make an exact copy. Yeah, why would you want to do that? Maybe you've got a production environment, but you want to do some things that might break it. Okay, so we create a test environment that mirrors the production environment. So we can create the test environment by just making a copy of all the services or servers on the production environment that we want to try to test these things. And then we can do the test or do the experiment and without any damage to the production environment. That's the reason. We just want to learn something. We want to test something. We want to try something that might cause big problems. All right, let's talk about templates. So templates is a feature of vCenter Server that builds cloning functionality to help you roll out virtual machines quickly and easily with limited administrative effort while protecting the master VMs from inadvertent change. If you, again, these guys, if you remember when we were in Set 4, when we said that once you create this golden master snapshot, what did I tell you never to do?
Power it on.
Yeah. Never power it on again. Because especially in Set 4, we were creating link clones, weren't we? So if there were link clones and we changed the parent, then we could, if we break the parent, we can break all the link clones, can't we? So again, with the template, we actually, you'll see that when we actually create a virtual machine, it's a virtual machine, normal virtual machine. We create it, we install it, we configure exactly how we want. But when we change it to a template, we can do one or two ways. We can clone it to a template, so we can take the virtual machine, make a clone into a template. Or we can convert to template, which means this is a virtual machine, and we make it into a template. But once you turn it into a template, you cannot power it on. You cannot just start, okay? So in Cert4, we've just been telling you to do it like this and do it like that, but there's nothing to actually stop you from turning it on. But when we actually, in vSphere, when we make it into a template, you can't actually turn it on. But what if you need to make changes? What if you forgot something? Well, if you forgot something, you can actually convert it back to a VM. Then you can power on, make the changes again, and then convert it back into a template again. But just like what we said with the templates or virtual machines in the past, templates can go out of date very quickly, can't they? So we've all been talking about staying up to date with your patches, your service packs, all these things. But if you create a template today and you don't change it for, let's say, 2 months, it's going to have security updates that's missing, right? So from time to time, you definitely need to actually update this. You start with a VM already that already has an instance of the guest operating system installed. Once the VM is in template, it cannot be powered on or have its settings changed. It is now protected in a protected format. It's referred to golden image, and it's used to deploy new VMs. So you're probably wondering why did Alex always call them golden masters and stuff like that? That's because it's not me. It's actually the terms that VMware uses. A template should be a pristine system and can be customized as needed. What does this pristine mean? This means perfect, not dirty. Okay, you know that if we install a new operating system, we put it on the computer and we start using it. Yeah, like it's clean, it's efficient. There's nothing like no junk on the system, right? And it's working. It's the best it can be, right? But you know that once you start using it over time, you start doing this. You have temporary files. You have downloaded patches that you've updated, and it's still residual on the computer. You've installed software. You've uninstalled software. You've gone to these websites. You've got caching of this and caching of that. You can see that over time, your system sort of degrades, doesn't it? Even the performance. If your maximum performance is like this, over time, you probably notice that your system might slow down because of the accumulated junk, I call it. Okay, the accumulation of the junk, the accumulation of inefficiencies, like if you uninstall a program incorrectly, you might leave residual stuff in the registry, or residual files, or residual temporary files, or cache, or anything like that. When we say pristine, it means don't use an old system that's been running for all this time to make a template. Okay, templates for deploying new systems, and you want it to be the best they can be. So deploy from a brand new one. Also, it should be very generic. You don't make a template into a domain controller, let's say, and then deploy it, because that template that's a domain controller can never not be a domain controller. It takes a lot of work to make it into something else, doesn't it? So just like our golden master idea we had in the Cert4, we make it very generic, and then we differentiate it into this, into that, into that. But there's also, if you know that we're going to have lots of web servers, we can still create a template that's a web server with the web server service installed, let's say Apache or IIS, and then make that into a template, because then that becomes a web server template. Okay, so it depends on what you want to do with it as well. Any information stored on the virtual machine becomes a template, will become part of the new system. So you put junk on there, it becomes junk on the new virtual machine. The best VMs to use for a template are VMs with a brand new, clean installation of the OS and any base components you must have. Let's say you have a proprietary antivirus, you have a specialized firewall, intrusion detection that you keep on each device, or agents that report to these services, then you would include those into the template. Here's an example. We can clone a virtual machine, or we can clone to a template, or we can convert. You can see that that's grayed out. It's grayed out because the virtual machine is actually running. You can't convert a running virtual machine to a template. Okay, so this is what's called the context menu. When you right click on something and choose something that's specific to that object you right clicked on. Don't customize templates, so you don't have any options for customizing the templates. The guest OS customization occurs when you deploy from the template, not when you create the template itself. So that makes sense, doesn't it? So the template is whatever. Then when we deploy it to a new system, that's where the customization takes place. So the new system is different from the template and different from any other deployments. Templates have a different icon than a VM, so it looks different. It's not a VM anymore because you can't even turn it on, and it's protected. The template object are available by clicking on the data center object and then selecting the virtual machines tab, or by adjusting the inventory view to show your templates view. So you might not even see it unless you're in the right view. Deploying a VM from a template, so we can clone templates. So cloning and templates are not supported when you're connected to the ESXi host directly. So basically you need vCenter for templates. The first time virtual machines are powered on, vCenter server will perform a customization according to your customization specification that you configured. Aside from these changes, the new VM will be exact copy of the original template. By including the latest patches and updates, you can save a lot of time. So your templates, you should power on every now and then, convert it back to virtual machine, update all the patches and updates, because we know that especially Windows, some updates are as big as a brand new operating system installation. Templates are a great way to help standardize the configuration of your VMs while also speeding up the deployment of your new VMs. Unfortunately, vCenter servers don't make it possible for you to transport a template between vCenter servers or between different installations of VMware vSphere. So that's an important point. So that's, I don't know why, to be honest. I don't know why. It says that you can't take a template from one virtual machine, one vCenter to another vCenter. I don't know why. To be honest, I don't understand this point, because to me,
it's just a file.
Yeah, it's just a file, right? To me, what I would do if I can't do this is I just convert it to a virtual machine, take the virtual machine to the new vCenter, register it into the VMware vSphere inventory, and convert it into a template. Right? Done. Easy. So I don't understand why this point is here. So maybe the point why it's here is to talk about the next point. To help address the limitations, VMware helped develop a new industry standard called OVF, Open Virtualization Standard. So that's probably the real reason, okay? Not so much you can't do it, but because VMware contributed to this OVF, and don't forget, the OVF is not, it's a virtualization, open virtualization format. It's an open format. So it's not a VMware format, right? So that means I can take an OVF and I can create Hyper-V virtual machines. If I take a OVF and then I can use it to create Rev or Red Hat Enterprise Virtualization virtual machines, etc., etc. All the big ones, VirtualBox, etc., all can use the OVF format to create virtual machines or to convert them. So OVF templates, Open Virtualization Format, is an open standard format for describing and configuring the virtual machine. It's originally pioneered by VMware and other virtualization vendors. Originally pioneered by VMware, but other virtualization vendors also support OVF as well. vSphere provides OVF support in two ways. We can deploy a new VM from an OVF template, so we can just take an OVF template and create a new VM from it. Or we can import it in VM, to do that, we import a VM from the OVF template. We can also export a VM as an OVF template. This functionality could be used in a number of ways. One of the reasons is that you can create a template that could be transported between multiple vCenter instances. Like I said, that doesn't really make sense to me because, like I said, even if I couldn't take the template files from one thing to the other, I could just take the virtual machines from one vCenter to another vCenter because it's the same. The only thing is that what if it's a different version? You know what I mean? So if you have a different version, you might have to use the OVF as a middle ground to get from one version, like especially a new one, to a really old one. But from old to new is okay usually. Or we could use it for transporting a VM from one vSphere installation to another vSphere installation. So again, we don't need OVF to do that. I can just use the file system, browse the data store, download and upload virtual machines just like we can download and upload virtual machines in VMware Workstation. Allowing software vendors to package its own product as a VM and easily distribute to customers. So this last point is interesting. So it allows software vendors to package its own product as a VM. You know what we did during the vCenter? We got a pre-packaged VM, didn't we? It was an OVA. So vCenter, remember we downloaded the virtual vCenter application, right? That's exactly what it's talking about. VMware gave us a package. We got that, and we just got a virtual machine inside of our thing as a vCenter virtual machine. But don't think that that's the only way. Let's think about this. What if my company was selling firewalls? Let's call it Alex's Firewalls or FortiGate or what's it? Palo Alto. You can buy their hardware devices, definitely, but you can also buy their virtual application, right? So you guys are doing the FortiGate stuff? Yeah. Yeah, you got the virtual applications, right? That you're working on, is that correct? Yes, no?
I'm not doing it.
You're not doing it. Yeah, you do it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you got the virtualized application, haven't you? You're working with. Yeah. All right. So basically, firewalls is one good example. They can have hardware firewalls, but you can also have virtualized applications. Okay. And if I was, let's say, FortiGate or Palo Alto or someone like these people, I could just say, I can package this up, give it to you. You put on your infrastructure, virtualization infrastructure, and then you have a firewall server, just like that. Then you manage it just like your other firewalls. So OVF templates. So the folder of files. The folder of files for OVF format puts separate components of the OVF template into separate files. For example, there's an MF file, which is a manifest file. So if you don't know what manifest is, it's just a list of what we got. Okay, if you're captain of a ship and you're transporting stuff from one country into another country, you must know exactly what you're transporting, or else the customs will arrest you. Basically, the manifest is where you keep a list of all the things. There's also a OVF structural definition, so that's OVF. The structural definition is equivalent to our VMX file. That defines what components we have. The VMDK, that's pretty obvious. That's a virtual hard disk file, and that's obviously the VMware format. And that's a virtual hard disk file. That's where the data is actually kept. That's the binary. So just like our VMX via virtual machines, we have a VMX file that contains the structure or definitions or how it's configured. Then we reference the virtual hard drives, and then we store the operating system and all the applications that's installed on the virtual hard disk file. A OVA is a single file that combines all these separate components into a single file. This format is easier to transport and distribute because it's just one file. Whereas this OVF has multiple files. So if you don't get every one of those files, you could have a problem. Let's examine a OVF template. Let me see. No pictures. Okay, so the manifest file has a .mf afterwards. Okay, good stuff. I'm not sure why I'm getting that meeting request. This allows vCenter service to verify that the integrity of the, it contains a SHA-1 digest. So if you don't know what a SHA-1 digest is, it's basically a file for checking that the file integrity hasn't changed. So if you think about it, if I have a file, all just ones and zeros, I perform an algorithmic function on it, I should get an answer, right? If I then send you the files and you perform the same algorithmic function on it, you should get exactly the same answer, shouldn't you? If nothing has changed. But if something has changed during its transport, like let's say I was sending it to you and someone intercepted it and they've put some malware in there, the binaries have changed, haven't they? And when you perform that same algorithm function, you might get a different answer. So when you compare your answer to what's stored in the SHA-1 digest, and if they're exactly the same, you can see that no one's tampered with it. But if it's different, maybe it's corrupted, maybe someone's added malware, maybe something's gone wrong. So this way we verify the integrity of the file. You heard of that before? You might have heard the term hash, something like that. So the OVF descriptor is an XML document ending with OVF, and like I said, that's similar to our VMX file. It describes what the components are, how it's configured, and so forth. It contains information about the OVF template, such as the product details, the virtual hardware requirements, licensing, and a full list of references to files and descriptions of the contents of the template. The VMDK, or virtual disk, has a VMDK extension. The OVF specification supports multiple virtual hard disk formats, not just the VMDK files used by the VMware vSphere. So I missed the E there. Okay, so that's templates. The next thing we're going to talk about is vApps. All right, so this vApps is not going to be that useful for our passing our subject, but we need to talk about it, okay? We're not going to do too much with it. We're going to just do a little bit, but let's actually think about something. All right, let's see if Visio is here. How can I draw on the whiteboard and have you guys see it? So let's have a basic diagram. US metrics, and then we go more shapes, and then we go networking, and we go to network symbols, network symbols. Set 3D servers. Okay. All right. So let's talk about Learn. Okay. We all know Learn. That's a website we get our learning resources from. So what's Learn? Learn's a web server. Okay. It's a web server front end. And basically, when we type in learn.tafesa.edu.au, well, let's make it HTTPS, and it's a web server. We type that into interface with it. But when we're interfacing with it, we are actually putting in our user credentials, aren't we? So this is a AD/LDAP. So when we log into Learn, we are putting our username, password in. That's our Active Directory username and password. Same one we use for our email, same one we use for everything else in TAFE. So that's using the Active Directory. Then when we actually go into Learn, we have unique pages or courses that's only for us. So there's also what's called a backend database somewhere there. And also, when we upload files, like lectures, put the resources on there, the PowerPoints, the learning activities, and all those kind of things. So we actually have what's called a content management server. So when you actually accessing Learn, or the thing we call Learn, which is a Moodle instance, we're actually using all of these services, whether you realize it or not. So basically what we could do is we could create each of these virtual machines individually, no problems. That's what we can do. And that's probably what happens most of the time. Or if we know that this is what we need, and let's say my company, okay, I'm going to start a new company. I'm going to hire all three of you guys. You guys are going to be my top technicians. Then we're going to hire some other people for other work as well. What we're going to do is we're going to create an e-learning solution. All right, that's my company, Alex's e-learning solution. You guys are all my employees. So we're going to get Moodle. We're going to install it on a server. We're going to get Active Directory. We're going to put it on another server. We're going to get a SQL server. And we're going to put on a create another virtual machine for database server. And we're going to create a content management server. And then we're going to package it all together. And we're going to sell it to all the schools in Adelaide. First Adelaide, next Australia, then eventually the whole world. Okay? So what do we want to do? So what we want to do is we want you guys to go to these schools, set up your virtualization infrastructure, and then put these virtual machines on that infrastructure. But instead of actually treating these things as individual virtual machines, I want you to train the staff, the technical staff there, to say that if anything goes wrong, what we need you to do is power on the virtualization infrastructure, check all that's working properly, and then right-click on this virtual app and start. Okay, and every week I want you to take a snapshot, but not take a snapshot of each of these virtual machines. I want you to right-click on this virtual app and take a snapshot. And if we're going to do some maintenance to the hardware, I want you to shut down these all these virtual machines, but instead of doing shutdown on each one of these virtual machines, I want you to right-click on this virtual app and click shutdown. So if all of these services are going to work together, what a vApp does is actually just packages them together so that when we actually give it to someone or put it in our own infrastructure, instead of dealing with these virtual machines individually as individual virtual machines, shut down, start up, snapshot. Remember, like your Cert4, again, I keep on saying Cert4, right? In the AWS subject, you had a group of virtual machines that you're working on always together, aren't you? Wouldn't it be good if you went and snapshot? You snapshot all of the virtual machine in one go. Would that be helpful? Probably. If you want to start up all your virtual machines so you can work on them, wouldn't it be good if you could just say start up, and it started up the virtual machines in the order? Which one first, which one second, which one last? Wouldn't that be good? That's more convenience, isn't it? So basically, that's what vApps are. vApps is a way of actually packaging all your virtual machines in a single unit, and you work with it in a single unit. You turn it on in one go, you turn it off in one go, you snapshot in one go, and all that kind of stuff. But we can obviously configure these things within the virtual application as well. So vApps are a way for vSphere administrators to combine multiple VMs into a single unit. Why is this functionality useful? Well, increasingly, people want to buy turnkey solutions. Do you know what I mean by turnkey solution? It means I put it on my system, I power on, and it has all the components I need to actually do my job. Just like I said in my example, we've got an e-learning solution. With all those virtual machines that we just talked about, we give it to these, not give it, we sell it. We can give it to the students, give it to the schools. We give it to you for free, but you pay for the infrastructure and you pay for ongoing support. That's our That's our marketing strategy, right? So every month you pay us, let's say $200 per school. And if we get all the schools in Adelaide, would that be a lot of money, wouldn't it? And you know what we have to do? We just remote terminal, just check it's working every day, done. If it's not working, then we do something. So increasingly, enterprise applications no longer constrained by a single virtual machine. So usually they use a lot of different components to get a solution working. For example, a typical multi-tiered application might have one or more front-end web servers, an application server, a back-end database server. Each of these servers is a separate VM and could be managed separately. But they are also part of a larger application that serves organization. So combining the virtual machines in a single vApp allows the VC administrator to manage the different VMs as a single unit. That's the benefit, it's convenience, okay? And like I said, we can then package it. When we create a vApp, it's a two-step process. We create a vApp container first of all. It's just a container. Then we add the virtual machines into the vApp container of all the ones we need. We can then edit the vApp container. The vApp container has properties, settings, just like the virtual machines. And the vApp has properties and settings, but to avoid the confusion about the settings or where they should be edited, VMware tries to make the vApp container as simple as possible. Lean means there's not too much extra wastage. So as simple as possible. There are really only a few settings you need to do at the vApp level. So let's look at this. So we can, within the vApp, we can define resources. Okay, to limit the resources. We can assign higher or lower priority to access the resources. So in the future we'll talk about managing resources, and we can actually assign resources to vApps, and then within the vApps, if there's 4 virtual machines, they could actually limit and control access to the resources that's in the virtual machines there. There's also IP allocation policy, which allows you to modify the IP addressing to be allocated to VMs contained in the vApp. When you use the fix option, the IP addresses must be manually set in the guest operating system. The transient option uses the vCenter ability to create a managed pool of IP addresses. And when the VMs are powered off, the IP addresses are automatically released. And then finally, the DHCP option uses an external DHCP server to assign the IP addresses. When you first create a vApp, you will only use fixed. Okay, that's probably most times, to be honest. If I'm like, for example, my example when I was talking about our e-learning solution, probably we use fixed. Why would you use something that changes, right? So that's probably the most common option. So you need to enable these other options if you want to use them. So here it is: IP allocation, fixed, transient, or DHCP. But fixed would be the one that you use most often. Then there's some advanced settings. This is where you can supply some additional information. So remember what I said, you can package up. I can say product name, Alex's e-learning solution, version 1.0, URL alex.com. Yeah, get your subscriptions here. Okay, so that we can put it all in there, and basically it's like a turnkey solution, like I said. What about the power settings? So you can power on or power off the virtual machines in the vApp in one step, like I said. Don't have to go to all the VMs and individually do it. But what if we all know that if I'm going to shut down something properly, if I want to start up something properly, there's sometimes an order we should start up. Even the virtual machines you're using for this subject now. Like we've got the TrueNAS, we got the vCenter, we got the ESXi servers, we got the Active Directory server, right? Five virtual machines. Which one do you think we should start up first?
TrueNAS and vCenter.
TrueNAS and vCenter. TrueNAS and vCenter? Well, TrueNAS, yes. vCenter doesn't really work without all the DNS working. TrueNAS, Active Directory, they probably can be started at the same time. Then the ESXis, then vCenter. All right, because don't forget, the ESXis need to use TrueNAS because there's shared storage, right? If the TrueNAS is not there, what can it use? So the TrueNAS should be running before the ESXi start up. but then the vCenter manages the ESXi, right? What's it going to manage if the ESXi are not there? So that's why even with our virtual machines, there is an order that we should start them up. I think even in the worksheets I mentioned, start up this, then this. But have you guys noticed that with the vCenter, even if you start up, you can't access it straight away. Even though it looks like it's all started up properly, you can't access it straight away because the vCenter still has services that's in the background still starting. Even though on the console you see it's all booted up, in the background it's actually still starting up the services, and that may take a little bit longer. So with the startup order tab, we can do that. So we can actually take your group of, so if we were doing your labs onto a vCenter, we can actually create a vApp for each of your labs as a group of virtual machines, and then we can edit the startup order to reflect what we want to start up first and so forth. And the shutdown action is default to set to power off, but I recommend that you change it to guest shutdown. So power off is just taking the power off, whereas guest shutdown shuts it down properly. And you can set this on a per virtual machine basis. So if we look at this picture, you can see there's a couple of examples. There's a OBSD and a Win2KR2, and basically that's in group 1. You can put some of these virtual machines in group 2, and if you look at this, it's at 120 seconds. So what does that mean? It means that it starts up group 1, then waits 120 seconds, and then it starts up group 2. And we can obviously be more fine-grained than that and add more groups as well. Okay, importing virtual machines from other environments. So this becomes useful knowledge when we think about the assignment 2. Assignment 2 was all about, what have they got now? And how do we give them the new infrastructure, right? So how do we move them from physical servers and some virtualized servers into a new environment? So this is for migrations, really. So 2 tools are in particular were included in previous versions of VMware vSphere. The vCenter Converter, which is a plugin for the vCenter server, and that adds the P2V functionality. If you don't know what P2V means, it's physical to virtual. So you can take a physical server that you already have, you convert it into a virtual machine. It basically takes the physical hardware away and replaces it with virtual hardware. And it does it in a way so that you don't need to install new drivers or anything like that. Okay, from within the vCenter vSphere client, administrators can initiate a P2V migration. Guided consolidation was a plugin for vCenter that helped customers access their physical servers to determine if they are suitable to run in a virtualized environment. So we can have this other thing to assess whether the servers are able to be virtualized. In vSphere 5, neither the guided consolidator or is available, but VMware still does a standalone product called VMware Converter. You can actually go get VMware Converter and still do this with that software. So administrators use all VMware Converter's V2V functionality, virtual to virtual, to export VMs out of VMware vSphere to other virtualization formats. So basically, what if we want to go to Hyper-V? What if our solution in our assignment 2 was to choose Hyper-V, but we've got VMware vSphere virtual machines now? Well, we can still convert these VMware vSphere virtual machines into Hyper-V virtual machines, should I say. This V2V functionality is helpful in moving VMs between VMware's enterprise class virtualization platform, vSphere, and VMware's hosted virtualization. V2V can also convert VMware Workstation to VMware vSphere or vice versa. All right, so that's the end of the presentation, and obviously you got your worksheets to go on with. So today's is worksheet 8, but if you haven't done every other one, obviously you need to do it in order.